The rain had started before dawn, a thin, cold drizzle that beaded on the stone balustrades of Buckingham Palace and darkened the gravel paths below. Inside the palace's east wing, where the corridors were long and the ceilings arched like silent cathedrals, Guardsman Rowan Alderton walked with measured, steady steps. His boots struck the polished floor with quiet precision, each stride embodying the discipline his family had upheld for generations. His grandfather had served here, and his father before him. Rowan carried that legacy with a quiet, unwavering pride. The Alderton line had guarded monarchs through wars, abdications, triumphs, and scandal. Their oath was not merely spoken, it was lived. Rowan paused near a tall window overlooking the mall. The flag fluttered faintly, rain-slicked and somber. He checked the time, just past 7. His shift had begun an hour earlier, but the palace felt unusually subdued today, as if holding its breath. Even the usual early morning bustle of private secretaries, aides, and footmen seemed hushed. Something simmered beneath the calm, though Rowan couldn't name it yet. He only felt it, prickling at the edge of his instincts. Rowan resumed his patrol, turning down a corridor known among guards as the Whisper Hall, a narrow passage connecting the east wing to the king's private offices. Voices often carried strangely here, scattering like echoes. As he moved, he brushed a speck of lint from his uniform, ensuring every crease was perfect. Presentation mattered here. Respect mattered. His father's voice often returned to him. A guard must stand so that no one questions the crown's dignity. He passed a door slightly ajar. The faint scent of lavender drifted into the hallway. Inside, a maid was arranging fresh flowers, her movements quick, yet careful. She looked up, startled at first, then relaxed when she recognized him. "Morning, Guardsman Alderton," she whispered, as though the corridor demanded silence. "Morning, Lily," he replied, offering a small nod. She had been working at the palace for years, always polite, always proper. She smiled as he passed, but her eyes held a faint tension. Everyone seemed to carry it today. Rowan continued toward the king's study, stopping briefly at the intersection where 4 grand corridors met like rivers feeding a vast, quiet sea. Footsteps approached from the far right. Rowan straightened, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Lord Winterbourne, one of King Charles's senior advisors, strode past with a stack of leather-bound folders. He acknowledged Rowan with a clipped nod. Rowan didn't expect more. The advisor was known for his stern efficiency. But Rowan noted the man's hurried pace. Winterbourne was rarely flustered. As Rowan reached the king's study antechamber, he took his post beside the carved oak door. This spot, though less glamorous than guarding the palace gates, held deeper meaning. Here, decisions shaping the monarchy's future were whispered, drafted, and delivered with quiet authority. Rowan had stood in this same spot during moments of celebration, when King Charles had greeted Princess Charlotte after her first charity speech, her small hand still trembling with nerves. And he had stood here on darker days, 2 days when tension seeped from behind those doors like cold fog. This morning, the door remained closed. A slice of warm lamplight glowed beneath it. Rowan adjusted his grip on the ceremonial staff, letting his eyes scan the adjacent corridor. A pair of junior aides passed by, whispering urgently. Their expressions were anxious, but when they saw Rowan, they grew quiet, nodding respectfully before disappearing through a side hall. The palace was moving, like a body harboring an unseen injury. A sudden rustle of skirts signaled the arrival of someone important, and Rowan braced instinctively. Queen Camilla swept into view, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. Even from a distance, Rowan could read the tension in her posture. Her chin lifted higher, her stride sharpened with irritation. She wore a deep navy coat with matching gloves. Her expression tightened in that familiar, displeased line. Behind her trailed 2 private attendants, struggling to keep pace. Rowan prepared to bow as she approached. But before he could, she fixed him with a stare colder than the rain outside. "You," she said, her voice clipped. "Should you not be stationed elsewhere this morning?" Rowan kept his expression neutral. "Your Majesty, my orders are to guard the king's study at this hour, as per the rota." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Whose rota?" "I was informed a different guard would be here." Rowan didn't flinch. "The assignment is standard, ma'am." For a brief moment, The queen studied him as though she were appraising a painting she did not understand and did not wish to. Her attendants stood silently behind her, glancing uneasily at one another. "Well," she said with cool dismissal, "I will speak with Lord Winterbourne. This post requires someone more suitable." Rowan bowed slightly. "Of course, your majesty." Camilla swept past him, entering the study without knocking. Rowan heard the quiet thud of the door as it closed behind her, followed by muffled voices. Though he could not make out the words, he recognized the queen's tone, sharp, impatient, frayed with something deeper than annoyance. The king's voice, though softer, carried an edge of weariness. Rowan stood motionless, breathing slowly through the tension. It was not his place to interpret royal conflicts, yet he sensed today would not unfold like any other. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Camilla exited, her expression even more severe, and her gaze flicked toward Rowan as though she had found something unpleasant lingering in her path. She said nothing, heading down the corridor swiftly. "Here." Attendants hurried after her. Moments later, King Charles stepped into the doorway. He wore a simple suit, his hair slightly mussed as though the morning had already pressed too heavily on him. His eyes landed on Rowan, softening with a recognition that felt unexpectedly grounding. "Good morning, Alderton," the king said quietly. "Good morning, your majesty." The king hesitated, glancing in the direction Camilla had gone, then back at Rowan. "You are to remain at your post. Do not be unsettled by disruptions." "Yes, sir." Charles nodded once, a small but resolute gesture, before retreating back into his study. As the door closed, Rowan felt a strange chill move through the corridor. Whatever had transpired inside that room, it was only the beginning. He sensed that his presence, his lineage, his loyalty, or something far more hidden had just stepped into the crosshairs of palace politics. But he could not yet see the shape of the storm. He only knew that it was coming. The morning deepened as the rain softened into a mist, leaving the palace grounds blurred and silvered beyond the tall windows. Rowan remained at his post, motionless yet alert, carrying the quiet confidence drilled into him since training. Still, tension lingered around him, tightening like a drawn bowstring. Whatever the queen had discussed with the king had unsettled the palace, and Rowan could feel the unease traveling through the corridors like a cold current. Yet no orders had arrived to replace him, despite her clear intention. He wondered how far the queen's discontent would spread before the morning was over. It was rare for her irritation to remain contained. It had a habit of becoming the palace's problem. A soft series of footsteps approached from behind him, quick, light, and unsure. Rowan turned slightly and saw young Thomas Whitford, one of the newer footmen, clutching a stack of folded linens. The boy's eyes widened when he realized he had Rowan's attention, and he attempted to stand straighter, as though remembering a last-minute lesson in posture. He was barely 19, earnest to a fault, and often overwhelmed by the palace's labyrinth of rooms and protocols. "Sorry, sir," Thomas murmured, nearly dropping a linen as he adjusted his grip. "Didn't mean to disturb you. I meant to take these to the king's private dressing room, but the route was changed again this morning, and I'm not entirely sure which corridor is still open." Rowan's expression softened. "This wing remains open. Continue down the Whisper Hall and take the left staircase. You'll reach the dressing room without issue." Thomas nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir. Everything feels different today. Have you noticed?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. "The palace has its moods, Thomas. Best to keep to your work." The boy nodded again, though his eyes held a flicker of worry, and he hurried down the hall, the linens brushing against his arms as he disappeared around the corner. Rowan watched him go, uneasy about the uncertainty in the young footman's voice. It mirrored his own unspoken concerns. A moment later, another presence appeared: Lily, the maid he had passed earlier. She walked briskly toward him, her face slightly flushed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. When she reached him, she paused, breathing in a controlled but strained rhythm. Something had rattled her more than she wished to admit. "Guardsman Alderton," she whispered. "I didn't want to interrupt your post, but something strange happened in the East Gallery." Rowan kept his voice low. "What did you see?" "I was delivering flowers to the Queen's sitting room," she said, swallowing. "I wasn't meant to enter yet. Just leave them outside. But as I was placing the vase on the table, I heard raised voices, very tense, not shouting, but sharp. It was Queen Camilla and Lord Winterbourne. They didn't know anyone was near. Rowan felt the shift in his chest, subtle but unmistakable. Did you hear what they said? Only fragments, she admitted, wringing her hands. But the queen was furious about something. Something she said the king refused to change, and she mentioned your name. Rowan held her gaze, his discipline battling a flash of surprise. My name? Yes, Lily said, her voice faint. She said, he cannot remain in that post. And Winterbourne told her the king had already declined her request. She was livid. She said something about taking matters into her own hands. I'm not sure what she meant, but you should know. Rowan's jaw tightened, though he kept his tone calm. Thank you for telling me. Go on with your duties. And take care not to linger near private rooms. Lily nodded, her worry evident, and hurried away. Rowan turned his eyes back to the corridor, silent thunder rolling through his chest. It was unusual for a guard to be at the center of any royal discussion, let alone a disagreement between the queen and the king. Something more than simple dissatisfaction was driving Camilla's frustration. He could feel it now, a deeper motivation threading beneath her anger, reaching into places he could not yet see. Minutes passed with slow, deliberate stillness, until a faint sound drifted down the hall, barely perceptible. A whisper of fabric, a muffled thump, and then a quick intake of breath. Rowan shifted his stance, tuning his ears. It had come from the small service corridor adjacent to the king's antechamber, an area staff used for delivering documents or refreshments. It was usually quiet at this hour. Rowan took a single step forward, listening. Another soft sound followed, like a glass brushing stone. His instincts stirred. This was no routine activity. He tapped gently on the king's study door. When no response came, he opened it slightly. Your Majesty, Rowan murmured. I will momentarily investigate a disturbance in the adjacent corridor. Go ahead, the king replied automatically, immersed in paperwork. Rowan closed the door and moved carefully toward the service corridor, his steps silent on the polished floor. The corridor's door was ajar. A sliver of dim light cut through the narrow opening. Rowan pushed it open gently, revealing the slender passage lined with shelves holding silver trays and crystal decanters. At first glance, the corridor seemed empty. But then Rowan heard the faintest rustle behind one of the tall cabinets. He approached slowly, every sense sharpened, until a small figure stepped into view. It was Thomas, the young footman, his face pale, his arms trembling. He held a fallen decanter in one hand, its stopper clutched haphazardly in the other. Thomas, Rowan said quietly. What happened? The boy shook his head, fighting breath. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to be here. I didn't even know this corridor connected to the other staircase. I was heading back when I saw someone leaving this area in a hurry. Someone? I didn't see their face, he whispered. They wore a dark coat, not a staff uniform. They moved quickly, like they didn't want to be noticed. I think they dropped this, but when I called out, they just disappeared down the corridor. Rowan crouched beside him, inspecting the decanter. It wasn't one from the standard palace supply. It belonged to the king's private collection. Someone had been where they shouldn't be, carrying something they had no reason to hold. Did you see which direction they went? Rowan asked. Toward the east gallery, Thomas said, swallowing hard. Rowan placed a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. You did the right thing telling me. Return to your duties. Say nothing to anyone. Thomas nodded shakily and hurried out. Rowan stood alone in the corridor, the weight of realization settling upon him. Someone had been moving through restricted spaces. Someone connected to the Queen's agitation, and Rowan could no longer pretend this morning was merely tense. Something darker was unfolding, and he was already caught in its path. The palace was beginning to shift, and the disturbance had only just begun. Rowan returned to his post outside the king's study, but the corridor no longer felt like a place of calm authority. It felt like a crossroads. Something had shifted in the palace, something subtle, yet dangerous, like a quiet rearrangement of shadows waiting for the right moment to tighten around him. The discovery in the service corridor gnawed at the edge of his thoughts. A stranger in a dark coat, moving through restricted areas, taking something from the king's private collection, and Camilla's open fury at the king's refusal to replace him. None of it was coincidence. Rowan replayed Lily's whispered account as he stood guard. He pictured the queen in the East Gallery, her voice low but sharp, insisting he be removed. The king's calm defiance, Lord Winterbourne trying to mediate while tension smoldered beneath the polished royal facade. What threatened her so deeply that she would involve senior advisors? Could it be connected to the intruder Thomas had seen? The thought tugged at Rowan's stomach. He was not the type to imagine conspiracies. Yet palace life had its own gravity. Secrets hid in the most polished corners. The door to the king's study opened again, and Lord Winterbourne stepped out. He carried a heavy folder and looked even more stern than usual. His gaze found Rowan immediately, assessing, measuring. Then the advisor took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Alderton," he said, "Her Majesty has expressed concerns about your presence here." Rowan's posture remained impeccable. "I am aware, sir." "His Majesty insists you stay." Winterbourne's tone held a note Rowan couldn't decipher reluctance or respect. "However, I must ask, has anything unusual occurred during your shift?" Rowan considered his answer carefully. He could not mention Thomas or the intruder without alerting whoever might be listening, and he had no proof the advisor wasn't aligned with Camilla's displeasure. "There have been minor disturbances," Rowan said. "Nothing that poses immediate danger to their majesties." Winterbourne studied him a moment longer, then nodded curtly. "Very well. Remain vigilant. The queen is on edge." As the advisor strode away, Rowan watched him disappear down the hall. On edge was an understatement. Camilla seemed ready to ignite the palace itself if she didn't get what she wanted, and Rowan sensed what she wanted was far more complicated than replacing a single guard. Moments later, voices echoed faintly from the far corridor. Two attendants hurried past, whispering in a panic. Rowan caught fragments. "Queen's orders! East wing sealed. King not informed yet." Their words vanished into the distance before he could assemble them. The hush that followed felt thick. Rowan inhaled slowly, grounding himself. His duty was to protect the king, even as politics, tensions, and secrets churned around him. And now he sensed he was guarding more than just a royal door. He was guarding a fault line. The muffled sound of a slammed door jolted him. It came from the direction of the East Gallery, the same path the unknown figure had taken. Rowan's instincts sharpened instantly. He glanced at the study door, then at the long hallway ahead. He could not abandon his post unless the king were in immediate danger. But then he heard another noise, a thud, a stifled cry. Rowan knocked once on the king's door. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I request temporary permission to investigate a noise of concern in the connecting corridor." The king opened the door slightly, his expression lined with stress. "Go," he said, "and take care." Rowan moved with silent urgency through the whisper hall, following the faint disturbances like echoes of trouble. The corridor felt colder here, the air tinged with something unsettled. As he approached the East Gallery entrance, he saw a figure standing near the tall windows, a uniformed palace steward, shaking and pale. "Sir," Rowan called softly. The steward turned, startled. "Guardsman Alderton." Thank heavens. He looked around, as though afraid someone might be listening. "There's been a disagreement, a serious one." "With whom?" "With the queen," the steward whispered. "She ordered us to seal portions of the East Wing. She said it was for security reasons, but she didn't clear it with the king's office. And now she's demanding that certain staff be reassigned, including you." Rowan stepped closer. "Did she give a reason?" The steward swallowed. "No, but she seemed furious. She said there were people in the palace she could no longer trust. She mentioned something about a document going missing." "A document?" A chill swept Rowan's spine. "Do you know what kind of document?" he asked. The steward shook his head. "Only that she's convinced someone accessed a secure area early this morning." She didn't say more. "The dark-coated intruder. The missing decanter. A sealed wing." Rowan's mind raced, connecting threads that hadn't existed an hour ago. Before he could ask more, another voice cut through the hall, a sharp, commanding tone. "There you are." Queen Camilla appeared at the far end of the gallery, her expression stern and unyielding. Her presence filled the space like a cold wind. She dismissed the steward with a single glare, and the man scurried away. Rowan straightened, bracing himself. "Your Majesty," he said calmly. Camilla approached with slow, deliberate steps. Her eyes glinted with something more dangerous than annoyance, an accusation sharpened into certainty. "You have been wandering beyond your assigned post," she said. "And during a morning when sensitive matters are missing from private areas. Explain yourself." Rowan held her gaze without faltering. "I was investigating a disturbance reported by staff. My duty requires it, ma'am." "Your duty," she said, each word dipped in disdain, "is to follow direct instructions. And my instruction was that you be removed from this assignment." "The king instructed me to remain, your majesty." A muscle twitched near her jaw. "This matter does not concern the king," she said flatly. "It concerns security and trust. And frankly, Guardsman Alderton, I do not trust you. Not today." The accusation hit like a blow, but Rowan did not let it show. "I have done nothing to break that trust." "Haven't you?" Her eyes flicked toward his gloves, then the corridor behind him. "Objects have gone missing. Doors have been opened without authorization, and someone was seen in a restricted area shortly before you left your post." She was setting a trap. "Are you implying I was involved?" Rowan asked quietly. "I am stating," she said, "that until this matter is resolved, you cannot remain near the king." Rowan felt the shift in her tone. This was not about a guard. This was about something she desperately wanted hidden. Before she could speak again, a voice echoed down the corridor. "Camilla, that is enough." King Charles stood at the entrance of the gallery, his expression stern, his presence immediately shifting the air. He walked toward them with steady authority. Rowan saw the queen's posture stiffen. The king looked between them, his gaze settling on Rowan first. "Alderton is not to be moved. Not today. Not under these circumstances." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Charles." But the king cut her off sharply. "If there is an intruder or a missing document, this is not the time to quarrel with loyal staff." Camilla's glare flickered, not anger now, but calculation. And Rowan realized the storm was about to break open. The gallery fell into a strained silence, as the king's words settled between them like a decisive stroke of thunder. Rowan remained perfectly still, though his heartbeat climbed with each passing second. Queen Camilla's expression froze, her eyes hardening into a narrow, assessing glare, not at the king, but at Rowan, as though she were silently rearranging her strategy in real time. She took one step closer, her voice lowering into a tone that often preceded explosive conflict. But before she could speak again, King Charles raised a hand, halting the moment entirely. "Camilla," he said, calmer now but no less firm, "enough is enough. We cannot afford internal hostility when something serious has occurred." She drew in a long breath, folding her arms with slow, deliberate precision. "Something serious has occurred," she echoed, "and it appears no one is listening to the one person who is actually taking it seriously." Charles exhaled sharply. "That is not what is happening, and you know it." Their exchange was quieter now, but strained, as though years of tension threaded beneath the words. Rowan kept his eyes forward, though he listened for the slightest detail that might reveal what he had unknowingly stepped into. The missing document, the intruder in the dark coat, the queen's furious insistence that he be removed. It all circled like a tightening net. Camilla turned away from the king and walked toward the tall windows overlooking the gardens. Rain still misted the grounds, blurring the hedges into soft gray silhouettes. She kept her back to them as she spoke. "A document was taken from my private sitting room," she said at last. "Not just any document, one that contains sensitive information regarding the late queen's personal correspondences. If released, it could bring embarrassment to members of this family." Charles stiffened. Rowan saw it clearly. The king stepped closer. "Why did you not tell me earlier?" "I attempted to," Camilla replied coldly, "but you were too busy defending him." Rowan felt the accusation like a pointed blade pressed toward his uniform. But the king didn't entertain it. He moved beside her, his gaze shifting between her and the rain outside. "Describe the document," the king said quietly. "It was a sealed letter," she replied. "One written by Elizabeth years before her passing, addressed to someone she never named publicly. She kept it hidden until the final months of her life. I found it among her private possessions, tucked between ceremonial notes. Only a handful of people knew it existed." "Why was I not told of its contents?" the king asked. "Because I was still deciding whether you needed to know," Camilla said sharply. "Elizabeth left no instructions. I thought it best to protect the crown from unnecessary complications." Charles's silence was heavy. Rowan watched the exchange closely. He could feel the truth rising, not about the letter, but about the Queen's motivations. This wasn't simply fear of embarrassment, it was fear of losing control. Finally, Charles spoke. Very well, but if the document is missing, the concern should be recovering it, not blaming the nearest guard. Camilla turned back to them. Someone accessed the East Wing without authorization shortly before your guard abandoned his post. Rowan kept his voice steady. I left with your Majesty's permission to investigate suspicious activity. Camilla approached him, step by step, closing the distance. And what did you find, Guardsman Alderton? Rowan met her gaze without flinching. A young footman saw an unidentified figure leaving the area in a dark coat. They dropped one of the king's private decanters. They fled toward the East Gallery. The Queen's eyes flicked with something sharp recognition or dread. A dark coat, she repeated. And did you see this person's face? No, ma'am. Convenient, she said under her breath. Charles shot her a warning look. Camilla! But she wasn't finished. She pointed a gloved finger at Rowan. If that letter falls into the wrong hands, if someone intends to use it against this family, you will answer for your negligence. Rowan kept his voice controlled. My duty is to protect the crown, Your Majesty. That is why I investigated. And yet the letter is still missing, she snapped. Before Rowan could respond, another figure burst into the gallery, Lily, the maid, her face pale and her breath shaking. She froze upon seeing the king and queen, her hands trembling in front of her apron. Your Majesties, forgive me, I wouldn't interrupt unless it was urgent. Charles stepped forward. Speak, Lily swallowed hard. I went to refresh the flowers in the Queen's private sitting room, and I found something on the floor, something hidden beneath the chair cushion, as if someone had placed it there in a hurry. Camilla spun so fast her coat flared behind her. Where is it? Lily pulled a folded piece of parchment from her apron, holding it with both hands. The Queen stepped forward, reaching to snatch it, but Rowan's instincts flared. Without thinking, he stepped between Lily and the Queen, his movement firm but respectful. Allow me, ma'am, Rowan said, for safety. Camilla glared, furious, but Charles nodded. Let Alderton handle it. Rowan accepted the parchment gently. It was old, its edges worn, the fold lines softened by time. He recognized the royal wax seal, half broken. The Queen inhaled sharply, as though seeing a ghost. That is it, she said. Give it to me. But Charles raised a hand. Not yet. He looked at Rowan. Alderton. Open it. The Queen's eyes widened. Charles. Absolutely not. But the king didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on the parchment, his expression firm and resolute. Rowan broke the remaining seal carefully. Inside was a letter written in a delicate, familiar script, the handwriting of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The king took the letter from Rowan, unfolding it with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then widened, the color draining from his face. Camilla stepped closer, trying to peer over his arm. What does it say? But Charles didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the parchment. Rowan saw something shift inside the king's shock. Then sorrow. Then something deeper, heavier. When Charles finally lifted his gaze, he looked at Rowan first, not his wife. Alderton, he said softly, you must come with me. Now. Camilla stepped back as if struck. Charles, what is happening? The king looked at her, his expression solemn. This changes everything. Rowan felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders like armor and burden all at once. Lily stood frozen, the gallery still misted with rain-softened light, the palace holding its breath. Then Charles turned sharply toward the north corridor. Alderton, he repeated, follow me. The palace is about to learn a truth it has not been prepared to face. And somewhere deep in the East Wing, a door slammed. The storm had only just begun.